My name is Shane Brodie. I'm a trans man. I'm traveling around the U.S. talking to fellow trans people, non-binary people, gender non-conforming people, etc. Everybody under that trans umbrella or, affiliated, adjacent, whatever. And we're talking about, like, identity, what's going on in the country, because there's a lot going on. Political beliefs, religious beliefs, if that's important to somebody, or if it's not, that's sometimes interesting too. Legislation, etc. And I have a guest today, and they're, like I usually do, they're going to introduce themselves in whatever way they feel comfortable. Yeah.
Well, hi. I'm really honored to be here today, and I wanted to say thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we're in your home. I love it. I love it when people invite me in their homes.
Yes. Really glad to have you here.
Yeah.
Well, I am a 52-year-old intersex man, and I have a unique story in that I was born male, and then I was born with several rare genetic diseases.
Oh.
And I had hypospadias, and I had shorty, and they circumcised me on the 8th day because I was born Jewish. And at least how my mom and my grandmother told it to me, the hypospadias is a condition where your urethra just comes out a little bit into the wrong spot instead of straight in the center.
I see.
And so then chordy is a bent. And usually they allow it to just grow, and as the child grows, it becomes normal.
Okay.
But it was really bothering either my mom or my grandmother. And so they decided to have surgery.
Oh.
Not knowing that
On a baby.
Not knowing that my body produced a lot of scar tissue. So then that caused my urethra to
Would that be
off.
Called keloiding?
Yes.
Keloid. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So that's like an overgrowth of scar tissue. Yeah.
Yeah. That caused me to not be able to go to the bathroom.
Oh, wow. That's an emergency right there.
Yeah. And so they did a surgery, and then they had to do another one.
Wow.
And at the age of 3.5, I'm told that they discovered that I was intersex.
Oh.
And that I had a right ovary and a right fallopian tube.
Wow.
And they thought I might have something called de la Chapelle syndrome.
Okay.
And so they decided that I was a girl.
Okay. So after having many surgeries on your penis.
Yeah, and having and being fully male, having
Yeah.
a penis, having testes.
Yeah. Then they decided that you were female.
Yeah. And my stepdad told me, he goes, all I can tell you is the doctor said you were a girl. And so we just listened to the doctors.
So it was the doctors that made this decision because you had a fallopian tube and an ovary. Huh. Okay.
And supposedly it was supposed to be easier for me because they were concerned about having the catheter and me being a child. But that doesn't excuse what happened to me.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody in the small town that I grew up in knew that I was born a boy.
Right.
And so...
and was that here in Oklahoma?
No, that was in Indiana.
Okay.
Northeast Indiana.
Yeah, another very conservative place.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was the family secret.
Okay.
Of course, it wasn't a secret
to
anybody but my family.
Oh my God.
It was something we were ashamed of.
Right. Goodness gracious.
And so, yeah, my mom would...
Did you grow up with knowledge of this? Because, I mean, when you're 3, some people don't have memories that go back that far.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And if I said that I was a boy, my mom would wash my mouth out with soap.
Okay.
My grandmother had... It was I think my grandmother paid for it, but I'm not sure.
Speaking of, for you folks that have never had that happen, to have your mouth washed out with soap, it sounds like, oh, that's kind of a joke or something. It's actually extraordinarily painful because soap gets into your membranes, like in your nose and your sinuses, and it burns. It's actually quite a punishment. If you've never had it happen, I've had it happen before when I was a kid, and it's painful and it lasts a while. So
Yeah.
it's a harsh punishment, actually.
It's very harsh.
Yeah.
And so I quickly learned that I had to play the part.
Okay.
I didn't have a choice.
Yeah. Right.
And
Yeah. I mean, from the beginning, you didn't have any choices. It's amazing that you had so many surgeries by the time you were like 3 years old. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And I've had people say, "Oh, well, parents wouldn't do something like that." And I'm like, "Oh, parents do wrong things all the time.
Yeah.
People just don't know it."
And
know?
doctors too. Doctors do wrong things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so as I was growing up, we lived in a small town, and it was just really hard. I would get bullied, and I'd get, you know.
It was kind of a talk of the town, I would think. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And
Excuse me.
when I became going towards being a teenager, adolescence, I didn't start to develop as a girl. I was getting broader shoulders. I remember standing in my great aunt's bathroom with my hands on the seat going, "I'm a boy. What is wrong with these people?" And my aunt had a talk with me. "You really don't want to be a boy. Do you want to be a girl?" And my mom was just very demanding. And she would take me to the doctors, and they would strap me down, and I was forced to have estrogen shots.
Wow.
And so I developed as a female, but I hated it.
Yeah. You know, I was also threatened with estrogen shots as well, or whatever kind of female hormone, because I didn't develop my menstruation until I was 16. So before then, doctors wanted to come in and regulate that for me, you know. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's pretty common. But in your case, it's rather drastic.
Yeah.
I mean, that's torture. At least I had a tiny bit of choice in there. You had no choice at all.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'm amazed at how jovial you are, actually, because that would, I'm just amazed at that, actually.
I've had the one thing that
Have you had a lot of therapy, or?
well, I've had a lot of therapy,
Yeah.
but the big thing that I've had is I had a relationship with God.
Okay, great.
My grandmother taught me to read at 2.5. I was really smart.
Okay, I guess
And
so.
by the time I was, I believe it was 4, they took a test, and then at 6 they took a test. I was like 198. And,
Okay. We're talking about IQ.
IQ.
Yeah.
I was very smart. My first gift that I really remember ever just absolutely begging for and just loving was the World Book Encyclopedia.
Oh,
Britannica,
yes,
the
right.
red collection that was real expensive.
I know. It was super classy, right? If you had something like that.
You were the it
That's
of
right.
perfection
That's
if you
right.
had that.
That's right.
I sat down and I read it.
Yeah. I remember doing that too, like just starting and just flipping the pages and just, going through a whole book like that. I also read, were you into like World Magazine or National Geographic?
Oh,
Yeah,
definitely.
World was like the kids' version of National Geographic, but it's still pretty good, Yeah, it wasn't dumbing anything down. It was just more age appropriate. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I loved it. And my grandmother got a subscription so I could read the national one too.
Yeah.
Yeah. The funny thing is that I got through the whole encyclopedia in 1 week.
Whoa.
And I went to my
Those
grandmother.
multiple volumes? Oh my goodness. And then you started in on Samuel Johnson's lexicon, and then the Oxford Old English Dictionary. And...
I actually did read the dictionary for fun.
Okay, me too. I did too. I still do that, actually.
I do too.
Sometimes I find old dictionaries, like from different time periods in the U.S. You know, like I found one that was post-war, just post-war. So it was early 50s, and it was a friend of mine's when she was a little girl, and she still had it. And it had little notes that she had put in it, and it had slang of the time, which came directly out of World War II, like World War II slang. And a lot of it was very militaristic, but that military language had infused itself into popular culture. So it was fascinating to me. Fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what I love about them is they give you a snapshot of the culture at the time.
That's right. That's
They're
exactly
not just
what they
the
do.
words, but the culture and
cookbooks as well.
Yes.
I love old cookbooks because it's like, okay, take a can of this and a can of that, and what decade are we in? Or ones that talk about sweetbreads.
Yeah.
Like who still eats sweetbreads? Maybe some German elderly people. I don't know, but for the time, that's what people were eating. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And I do want to say, for any of my family or anybody that's listening that knows my mom, I'm not trying to be bad on my mom.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not trying to talk badly about her. I just am giving my facts.
Yes, yes.
My
'Cause
mom,
it's your life.
Yeah,
It's
and
your
she
life.
really, I don't think she knew any better.
Yes.
I think she was trying to do what was right. It just
Right.
wasn't right.
Right. And there's a power structure that we are all in, right? And a lot of that, what we're talking about, is the power structure of the medical associations who have so much power. I mean, when you go into, even me as an adult, I go in and I'm expected to be submissive. I'm not naturally submissive, right? I have to dumb myself down a little bit at the same time that I'm often educating the person about being trans. But that's what's expected, that you follow what they say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I came out here to Oklahoma, I didn't tell anybody because I was considered trans back then.
Okay.
And it wasn't trans by choice.
Yeah. Right.
It was trans by my mom's choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the doctor's choice. And so people viewed me as trans. And then when I decided to make the transition back to male, because I was female for a long time.
Okay. Did you feel like you were a trans person as a female person?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
I always felt male.
Okay.
There was never a time that I felt like a female. Even when I had a brain injury and didn't know who I was, I woke up thinking I was a boy.
Wow.
I didn't have any memories of anything. I didn't know who I was or who anybody else was. And when I started to get my memories back, it was of being 4 years old. And I could tell you
So
that...
those very deep memories, the long-term ones, yeah.
And they say that the more painful memories are, the more you remember them.
Right. Because
the deeper seated they are.
That's because we tend to focus on the negative because of it's a defense mechanism against predation. Yeah. So we hold on to the fear. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remembered the things that happened to me starting from being 4 years old. And I thought I was a boy. And yet I knew Gerald Ford was president. I knew my address.
Okay.
I mean, all the things that I knew about. And people say,
that also happens with Alzheimer's as well. People remember the things that they grew up with, but not at anything since then, like the old music and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was really quite a journey to get back.
Right. And then, but you're building back a life that you didn't feel comfortable in. So that must have been really jarring, I bet.
It was.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I remembered my relationship with the Lord. I met him when I was 4.
Okay.
And we had a situation where I was Jewish, but we had to hide it.
Okay.
Because we were in Northeast Indiana. And Ku Klux Klan was very prevalent.
When was this, by the way?
1975.
Okay.
I was I was born in 1970, and I was born in Indianapolis, and then we moved up to a small town, Hoagland,
Okay.
between Fort Wayne and Indianapolis.
Sure.
And so I saw crosses burn in people's yards.
Oh, God.
I saw all kinds of things happen. And so
In the 70s.
in the 70s, so
Good
it was life or
God.
death to not let anybody know.
Yeah.
And we would leave for me to be able to go to another town, for me to be able to go to a synagogue. And my grandma would always take me. And yet she had bought a membership to a Lutheran church.
You would go to another town to be able to go to synagogue. Wow. Oh, wow. Okay. Sorry, that just hit me.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then my grandmother had paid for us to have memberships to the Lutheran church.
Okay.
That she never stepped foot in.
Okay, so that was a cover.
That was the cover.
Okay, yeah.
And so...
Yeah, there's some places that you go to, like the first question they ask you, they don't care about anything else, is what church you go to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are you a member?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was really quite a thing, because I was having to learn how to navigate all these different mores, because my grandmother had rich friends. My parents were poor.
Yeah.
So I was Jewish and Christian. I was male and female.
Right. Right. And class-wise, you're kind of all over the place, too.
I had to learn how to act when I'm around the rich people.
Yeah.
And how to act when I'm around poor people, because totally different mindsets.
Yeah, yeah.
And totally different belief systems. And you needed to be able to fit in.
Right, right. Well, it's a good thing you're so intelligent, so you learned how to cope or how to adapt to that.
I think, thank you, Lord, for that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have made it otherwise.
Wow.
Because I'm a very independent person,
Sure.
and I'm a very nonconformist. And
Okay.
so it was, and having to learn how to conform to all these
Oh
different...
my God. Yeah, so I'm also very nonconformist, so I get you. So I'm thinking to myself, how would I have dealt with that? That would have been really difficult, because you're having to please everybody around you, and that's a big safety thing.
Yeah, it's life or death.
Yeah, yeah. And then at the same time, you're like stirring inside because none of it sounds right. None of it sounds really right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have a very strong sense of right and wrong.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so
Oh, no.
I was always,
We're like twinsies.
yeah.
We were talking about this beforehand. We were like, he was like, are you Scottish and Irish? And yeah. Oh, and we're both born in 70. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yes.
That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've got some German and some French. And
Yeah, I have a little Norwegian. And yeah, I'm not in the Mensa side, but I was, gifted, quote unquote, or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
yeah, it's amazing how it all just sort of comes together.
You're very resourceful. So you have a relationship with the Lord. Is that coming from both of those traditions, Jewish and Christian, or do you favor one of the over the other? What's going on with that?
I actually I consider myself Jewish.
Okay.
I don't like to be called a Christian.
Yeah.
And yet I would fit that mold.
Yeah.
I can operate in both realms, because I
Yes.
feel like I'm both.
Yeah.
But I don't like messianic.
Yes.
Because so many people that I know that are messianic aren't
Yes.
actually Jews. What they are is Christians that got hurt, left Christianity, and started their new religion.
Okay. Yeah.
Because they pulled parts of Judaism.
Yeah.
And I went to a messianic place one time, and they were saying how the Jews did this and the Jews did that. I was like, no, they don't. And they were like, yes, they do. And I was like, no, they don't. I'm Jewish. I've never done that. No self-respecting Jew would do that.
So I thought you were saying messianic as kind of just an adjective or something, to describe something. But messianic is an actual thing, an actual movement.
Oh, there's actual movements
Okay.
of messianic people.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
there's people that call themselves Hebrew roots.
Okay.
And then there's so there's like 3 different denominations of messianics.
Okay.
And one of them is Jewish people who have found the Messiah, and so they continue to practice Judaism, but with adding the belief in Jesus.
I see.
And so there's that, and that's respectable. I know of some people in Kansas City and some different places that are messianic that are great.
Okay.
But then there's the people that are messianic who have found themselves as outliers in the Christian community.
Sure.
And so they've just taken on some of the ideas of Judaism and some of the roots of it and sort of formed their own religion where they only do part of Christianity and part of that.
Yeah.
And then it's
I've heard of some that are like Jewish people who've moved towards Christianity, and they want other people to do that and move away from Judaism. Is that part of this as well?
No.
Okay, that's
I
something
don't
else.
believe in proselytizing Jews.
Yeah. Okay, that's what that is. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I don't believe in that.
Yeah. They sound like very harmful people. Yeah.
They're
Like
some of them called
like anti-Jewish, in fact.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
They call themselves, some of them call themselves Jews for Jesus.
Okay, that's
and
it.
I've met some of those that are nice and some of those that aren't. So
Overall, they don't seem like a nice.
they're the
thing.
controversial people.
Yeah. They seem controversial is the least of what you could say about them, I think.
Yeah.
But okay, so you're
So my relationship with God is what really pulled me through. Believing that when I read the scriptures and like Jeremiah 33:3 says, "Call on me and I will answer you."
Yeah.
And so I was like, this really resonates with me.
Yeah,
And it gave me
I've heard that before. That somebody's faith gave them the strength to transition, for instance, which is different from you, but it gave somebody deep strength. Yeah.
Yeah. And I've got a lot of church hurt, and I've got Jewish hurt too.
Right.
And so I had always said that it's like I can't blame God for what people do because they're trying to represent God, but they've got their own ideas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you read the Bible, what's the Bible about? The fall of man over and over and over, so
It's been really painful, and yet it's really grown my character.
Okay.
Because for me, learning the Jewish part, the idea that there's always 3 sides. They make this joke, 2 Jews, 3 opinions.
Right.
But you see that same idea in a lot of different things.
There's a lot of humility, I think, in Judaism as well, which I find in Christianity is not the case. It's more concretized belief and like this is it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas there's a lot of discussion within Judaism. There's a lot of argument. There's a lot of interpretation that is respected and not just like that is wrong and this is right. No, let's discuss it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the whole tradition, it seems like.
Yeah. One person has an opinion, and then the other person has their side, and we all see things through the lens of our experiences.
Yeah.
And then there's what actually happened.
Yeah, right.
And so when we can stop and try and look at things from somebody else's point of view, then we can better understand. And this is an art that I feel like we've lost in our nation. Because we used to be able to listen to others and have conversations and come together.
Sure.
And now we're so divided.
Yeah.
And people think, I've heard people say, well, if you agree with that policy, then you're not a Republican. And if you're not a Republican, then you're not on God's side.
Sure.
And I've had other people say, well, if you associate with those Republicans, then you're not a Democrat. And so you can't be for us. And so you're against us. And so we're going to attack you. And I'm like, wait a minute, why can't we just talk? What is your point of view? what is your story? Why do you think that?
Yeah.
Because if I'm wrong, I want to know. But I've also got information and experiences that you've never had.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
I can see that in terms of like, discussing, the experience of trans people or intersex people and that sort of thing. And, I would hope that people would listen to that, or the experience of people of color here in the U.S. or immigrants and, gay people, etc. But personally, I know this goes against everything that you just said, but I actually like that there's polarization right now because there are some bad ideas out there. And unfortunately, we see them being enforced by the state.
Yeah, and that makes me so upset.
Yeah. And so I'm glad that people are against that. And I want to see more people against that, right? Less working with the Republicans to get this stuff passed and less passivity about wrong that's happening, right?
Exactly.
The things that have been going wrong for a long time, too. Not just right now, but things that have been going wrong for a long time.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah. And so we were talking about how kind of the state and medical systems, et cetera, are dealing with trans people as well as intersex people. And you mentioned that something's going on with the governor, who's very right-wing, who unfortunately just got reelected. What is that quote that you just mentioned?
Governor Stitt, when he learned that, this is from an article called Fear of Non-Binary and Intersex People Ignores Medical Science. And it's by Anna Poole, and you can look it up on the web. It said, when Governor Stitt learned that his Oklahoma State Department of Health had settled a lawsuit by establishing a process for people to amend their birth certificates to show non-binary sex designation, he released the flawed statement, I believe that people are created by God to be male or female, period. There's no such thing as intersex or non-binary sex. And I'm like,
yeah,
Lord help us.
And, it's actually quite common. Mm-hmm. Yeah, intersex conditions are actually quite common.
Yeah, and Oklahoma State Senator Michael Bergstrom said, when babies are born, they're either male or female based on their genitalia. Unfortunately, neither one of these men are scientists, experts, doctors,
right,
or intersex individuals themselves.
Right, and that's the problem when we have politicians trying to legislate what medical providers do, trying to get in between doctors and their patients, between parents and their children, etc. It's that certainly isn't conservative, promoting the government getting into people's private lives. That doesn't sound conservative to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this has been very confusing to me because they talk about the Democrats being communist and fascist.
Yeah, right.
And yet they're talking about telling me what I can do with my health care and the health care of my children. Right. And they're not promoting family values. No. Even though they're standing on that as their platform. Right. And so I had been a lifelong Republican, and this has really caused me to not be a Republican. Right
so
now.
When did you make that shift, by the way?
It was about 2 years ago.
Oh, okay. Recent.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Were you like a Trump supporter or anything like that? Or
no, I wasn't a Trump supporter.
Yeah. That's kind of going too far there.
That's really right. Because I don't believe that people change their colors just overnight.
Okay. And by colors, what do you mean?
People have said to me, how can you support someone that would be bad for women? Okay. And I'm like, that's the question I have for you. Because in my opinion, humble as I try to be, Trump was very loved by some, but...
Yeah, rappers really loved him. Yeah, he was part of like so many rap songs.
Yeah. And yet I saw him be bad towards people.
Yes. Yeah.
Just watch The Apprentice.
Sure.
I really don't believe that show was fake.
No.
He had a disrespect for
he's
people.
Just abusive, just casually all the time. Yeah.
And so, and then
And chaotic.
and he fed on chaos, and he treated
Yes.
people, especially women, with a lot of disrespect.
Yes. Yeah.
And then, just because you're praying for him and you've put a label on him, I'm sorry, but I don't know that always makes it true. Mm-hmm. I think denial is a very powerful thing as well.
Mm-hmm. So, what made you a Republican, I guess? What was about Republican politics that that you appreciated?
Well, I was for small government.
Big truck out there.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
I was for small government.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want the government in my stuff.
Okay. So you're kind of on the libertarian edge of that.
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Apparently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because that's family values, and having small government, not having them interfere with me because of what happened to me, especially.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I once had an interview where I was the subject. Nothing came about that. She was actually doing a big project with the Knight Foundation and MIT and all that. But I don't know. She didn't actually report on anything about me. But at some point, she was asking about my early life, and because my parents had incarcerated me in a mental hospital when I was young because of basically being queer and trans and all that stuff. And then she kind of got it. Oh, this is why you're so contrarian. This is why you're so for individual liberty. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Because it was taken away from me.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And you find out how valuable it is.
Yeah. When you have no rights, suddenly you really want your rights. You really want to fight for those. And it made an indelible mark on me, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I hear you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I became a therapist.
Okay.
I've been under supervision right now. I'm unemployed.
Oh, okay. So you're in your hours that you have to do in order to become a therapist? Or?
Yeah, here in
Okay.
Oklahoma.
It's like clinical hours or something?
Yeah, you have the school process of you do your big long practicum and an internship, and then you take the test and you graduate.
Yeah.
And then you have 3,000 more hours that you have to do afterwards. It's like a residency for a doctor.
Right.
And so I have been in that process for about 5 years.
Okay.
And I had worked with a lot of trans youth and a lot of intersex and non-binary people, as well as just abuse and all kinds of things.
How does this hook up with the Republicanism? Because we were just talking about that.
Well,
freedom.
The freedom. Because what I've seen with kids is that they don't have that right. And the Republican Party right now has moved with so many bills to make sure that transgender people can't use the bathroom, that people can't play in sports, that people can't get health care.
Yeah.
And it's like...
Parents can't help their trans kids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And at the same point, the Republicans have been very against mental health.
Yeah.
And especially coming out of this pandemic, there's such a need for mental health.
Yes. And you can see that all around Oklahoma, too. There's a lack of services, a big lack of services here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the state government is really failing people who have mental health problems here. Definitely.
I believe so. Yeah. And I believe that this isn't the Republican Party that's... I was a Ronald Reagan Republican Party.
Okay. So you've just seen a change in the Republican Party, and you just can't be a part of them anymore, basically.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before you connected on some issues, but now it's too far right, too authoritarian. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing so many of my clients that parents are Republican.
Yeah.
And they're like, but this isn't what we signed up for.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so...
Actually, a lot of those parents get involved in PFLAG, too, and even start their own chapters. It's because it's parents of lesbian and gay and trans people, And sometimes those parents are very conservative, and they find that there's no support for their kids. So they start PFLAG chapters.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's really important for them to realize that there's resources.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to dig for them. You have to look.
Yeah. Well, PFLAG, like I just mentioned, is a great place to start, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I want people to have hope.
Yeah. Yeah. How is that possible? To find hope?
Oh, well, I believe there's several ways.
Okay.
Of course, first, I really believe that having a relationship with God is very important. And that's where I get my hope.
Yeah.
But another way to get hope is to take action.
Okay. Yeah.
Not sit and be like, do the PFLAG.
Yeah.
Get involved, look at resources, find yourself a community of people that will support you. Realize that just like I don't want everybody to assume that, and I have it all the time, where people assume because I transitioned, oh, they're trans. I don't believe there's anything wrong with trans.
Yeah.
I belong to trans groups. I have gone under the label of trans.
Do you feel like you're under the trans umbrella?
I do.
Like I mentioned earlier?
Because I've grown up in it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Even though it's somewhat imposed on you. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so...
Well, not somewhat. It was imposed
It
on
was
you.
definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
And for a while there, I had... I didn't believe I was trans. But then I became to believe that I have lived the trans experience.
Yeah.
I am trans, and I'm intersex. I
Right.
can be both.